The Johnversations Podcast. As always, I am your host, John Connor, saying thank you for tuning into episode 48. My guest today is a Houston-based doctor with an impressive educational background. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's and doctoral degrees in marriage and family therapy. You may know her from a little show called Married at First Sight. It's all or nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Dr. Viviana Coles. Dr. Viviana, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be a part of this Johnversation. I'm super excited.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, let me ask you before we, obviously the show this season it's on another level. There are people who online who are seriously invested, and there's been a lot of online chatter and emotion behind it. And I definitely want to get to all that. But first and foremost, I wanted to ask you, with COVID, everything that's going on, and especially with, you being a doctor and being so involved in psychology and things like that, how are you doing, throughout COVID? Is your mental health okay? Because I know a lot of us are struggling. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you so much. Honestly, I have been so fortunate that my practice has been able to make the transition to virtual really seamlessly. I was already doing a lot of virtual practice before, just because I was always in a different city. So my clients have been amazing, and my practice, now we've gotten back to a place where some of the people who work for me are seeing clients in session, in office, lots of sanitation going on, lots of masking, of course, and then spreading couples out so that they're not having to wait in a joint waiting room. It's been great for me, honestly. I feel like I'm just so fortunate that I picked a career that I can do whenever, wherever, and fortunately, it's kind of the backbone of my business. So I love that. Now, with the show, that was a lot more scary, just because, it's one thing if I'm not seeing clients for a month. It's another thing for an entire franchise and all of the people involved. I mean, there are countless people that I don't even know are a part of the show that are a part of it. It's such a big system, right? And I was very concerned for all of them, because a lot of people that work in film and production are freelance, and they really count on these projects going as smoothly as possible. So I was very scared for them, didn't know what that was going to be like, but I was really proud of the way that Kinetic Content was able to very quickly and decisively put plans of action into place that would adhere to both CDC. And now I have to tell you, and I'm not going to complain about it because it's keeping us safe, right? But it's above and beyond what the CDC wants. And that's a little bit I've been vaccinated. So I feel a little bit less like I need to quarantine all the time, especially when I'm reading the CDC. They're like, oh, you don't need to, but I do it anyway. And, there's just a lot that goes into it. And truly, it's about keeping everyone safe, not just for the purpose of keeping our own health, right? But it's also because this is a big machine, and we need everyone to be able to continue going through it. And we want to put out more seasons every year, and we believe in the process. So it's been great, though. Overall, it's been great.
Yeah, I know it's hard. My wife is, and people on the show are probably like, stop talking about your wife. You talk about her all the time. But she's a social worker, and she works in a treatment center where they help women who are, trying to get off drugs and things like that. And she got her vaccine. And so I know, for people who've been vaccinated, there's this little itch to be like, well, I can do, eating in a restaurant sounds nice, or, things that, over the past year, it kind of feels like you wouldn't even dream of, so.
Right. Well, and things have always been a little bit different here in Texas. Houston has done an amazing job of trying to keep our millions and millions of people safe, but it really is a personal choice. We all have to make the personal choice to wear a mask, to social distance, to, if we're going to go into a store, make sure that it's not too full, to, if you're going to go out somewhere and eat, that you're eating outdoors. Like there's a whole lot that you can do, but it has to be personal. We can't just go by what our governments are saying. We have to use our common sense and our social sense.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And I'm one of those people, I sometimes I have to try very hard to be courteous, because my initial reaction, like I'll be in the grocery store and I can feel like someone's breath on the back of my neck. And like my immediate response is to want to turn around and be like, get back. And then you have to like take a breath and say, like, is it worth elevating like the situation to something beyond what's going on? But I find myself having to fight that impulse immediately. Or people, if you are wearing a mask, who like, if you don't want to wear one, you're right, it's a personal choice. But like, if you wear it over your mouth, but over your nose, like,
I think you should absolutely wear a mask. For a lot of, unless it hurts you, right? There are some people that hurts them or whatever that means. But it's just funny because I've only had to say to someone like, hey, I'm trying to do the 6 foot distancing thing once. And they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. But I've been around when that has not been the case. I was recently with Dr. Pepper, and she asked someone in an elevator, like, hey, can you please pull your mask up? And she lost it. This woman lost it. It was the most uncomfortable. It was so embarrassing. I felt so badly for everyone who had to witness it. I'm like, literally, it's going to be maybe a minute, but it's not that hard to do. Just do it. So yeah, we could go into all that, right? But yeah, I don't think there's any clear answer as to how to deal with people who aren't necessarily feeling the same way that we do about how to stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like keep the head down and be as safe as you can. That's really, and it's funny too, because, you mentioned doing your practice virtually now, where, I've talked about it on the show before, but like I got a lot of anxiety, when COVID started. I have a 2-year-old daughter. And so I started having this fear that like something was going to happen to me before she got a chance to know me. And it was like, just like, it felt like it was kind of like burrowing like into my chest. And I was like, well, I got to talk to somebody about this. And for people who are going through that, I can personally attest the virtual therapy is amazing, because it's just, I sit right here like I'm doing the show, and just like, this is all the things that are going on in my head that are freaking me out this week. And you don't have to go anywhere or deal with anyone. So it's really awesome.
Yeah. And I think that what's the biggest pro to having a world where everybody's more comfortable with virtual talks and virtual videos and all that, is that people are more comfortable, so we can still get the sense of who you are, even if you're not right in front of us. Because body language is a big deal, right? And we get to see a lot of that in person. But now that people are so used to it, it doesn't feel like you're talking to, a cardboard cutout. People are now just very like accustomed to it. So that's a real plus for our field.
Yeah, it seems like it takes away the intimidation factor, especially for someone who, because I hadn't gone since I was a kid. And so there's this, I think, especially for a lot of men, there's a mindset where like, oh, if I have to go to therapy, there might be something wrong with me. And so I really feel like that kind of helped, just to be like, I'm at home, I'm comfortable. And you get the image of like laying on the couch while there's someone just nodding and taking notes. That disconnect goes away very quickly, because you're very much, I'm in my pajama pants and I got my cup of coffee and just, I vacuumed, and now I'm going to go talk to somebody about my mental health. So I don't know. I think do you feel like even after the pandemic has settled, do you feel like that will continue to be a pretty big, a pretty big go-to for people in now? Maybe people have gone to someone before, but now they're doing virtually. And do you think that will be something that kind of continues on a bigger level?
Absolutely. I think that now people are realizing that they have access to some of the best therapists in the world. And just because they're in a small town that maybe doesn't have a lot of options, or maybe the options that they have, they're best friends with and can't see them, or, people who are across the globe and want to see me are able to do that now. And, I am licensed in California, Texas, and New York, but I'm now able to see people from all over. doing coaching or, just it's just, it just makes sense that it would continue because of the access that you get to lots and lots of different types of specialists.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like the woman that I see, she is in Hawaii, but she's licensed in Tennessee. So she, got licensed in Tennessee, then moved to Hawaii. But because of that, she's like, yeah, sure. And it works really well because in my day job, I typically work later hours. So she's, 2-3 hours behind me. So it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about like getting in within my normal off. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of benefits that, it seems like people may want to continue to take advantage of,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I did want to ask you this because, again, I definitely want to get to the show. Like I said, there's a lot of, as the kids call it, the tea to talk about. But
yeah.
Before we kind of get to how, for me, it's kind of important to know, like, we know where you are now. You're on a very successful show. Again, people are very invested in it. It seems I'm in Married at First Sight Facebook groups. I'm on the subreddit. Like, there are people who are very, very passionate about the show and what you guys do. But I also think it's important to know, hey, not only you're here now, but how did you get there? So I guess I wanted to ask, when did you find your interest in, both family therapy and, the sex therapy side? Because it seems like something that like you would have to be sort of specific about. It doesn't seem like it's something that you just kind of like fall into. So talk to me a little bit about your path and how you kind of found your calling.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I did know that I wanted to go into being a counselor or therapist pretty early on. My junior year of high school, my school was a type of place where you have to know your plan. You have to be ready to go, pretty competitive. And so I found out through talking to my college counselor that there is such a thing as counseling, and that is a world that exists that helps all sorts of issues. And she said, go take Psychology 101 and Sociology 101 and see what you think. And it was after that first semester of college, I was like, I definitely want to be a therapist. And once I knew that I wanted to be a therapist, I looked into what it's going to take. Well, I have lots more school to do. In my family, it was a given that I would go for my doctorate as well, which you don't have to do as a therapist. You do have to get your master's, but you don't have to get a doctorate. So I knew I had at least 8-9 years of school to go. So I rushed through college. I did it in 3 years. Then I started my master's program. I did that in 2 years. It was during my master's program when I was in Florida that I found out that there is such a thing as sex therapy. And over there, Florida is the only state that requires that in order to do sex therapy, you have to go through a certification to become a certified sex therapist. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this on the side because lots of people are doing child therapy, play therapy, art therapy, substance abuse therapy. And that just wasn't really my thing. Didn't have much interest in that. I can't say that I had a ton of interest in sex therapy, but I knew that if I was going to be working with couples, which I wanted to do, that I didn't want to be caught like a deer in headlights, right? And I wanted to be able to talk. If they ever brought it up in session, I wanted to be able to help them. And then it was once I started doing my internship for that I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I like it and I'm good at it and people give me positive feedback. So I decided once I finished my master's, I was going to get started with my doctoral program. I did my first 2 years there in Florida, but after that, it was going into my doctoral project, which I could do from wherever. So I came back home to Houston, started my practice, and I put that I was a certified sex therapist on my card, and it was like just a line of people. I was super pregnant with my first. With our first child at that point. And so I immediately had to bring on an intern. And then I had to bring on another and another. I mean, people were just clamoring for the sex therapy piece. I've always been a relationship therapist, first and foremost. And so having all of this interest in sex therapy, I was like, okay, this is going to be fun and always different. But that's when, life gets in the way. I end up, we end up having a second child, and I actually didn't graduate from my doctorate until I was like 7.5 months pregnant. I looked like a big old blueberry in my robe, the big floppy hat, but I was like, I have to do this before he comes, because once the second baby came, I knew that it would be like, my whole life is going to be kids and practice. 100%. So I finished that, and it just has ever since really been I don't know, I just really enjoy helping people to have the ultimate love life. And that's something that I've done even in middle school and in high school. People would come to me with their relationship issues, and I didn't think that was a job. I really didn't. But once I figured out what it was and what it was called and how to get there, I was like beeline to it. So yeah, I've always known that this is what I want to do since high school. And I'm so fortunate that I've been able to find so many different avenues to use my skill set, and fun avenues, because not everybody gets to do that. And a lot of practitioners and clinicians end up having burnout and they leave the practice.
Yeah. And it's, I guess what I want to ask is, being a sex therapist, I think when people hear that who may not be familiar with exactly what you do, I'm sure that there's all sorts of like ideas that go on in their head about like what, like, do you come and watch us? Are you, critiquing my form? Like, what are you, like, if you're not sure. So for folks who may not know, kind of as far as the sex therapy side goes, talk a little bit about what that entails. So if someone's listening who was like, oh, I may be interested in doing something like that, what's the expectation if they were to come and see someone like you?
Sure. The people who come to see me usually come to see me very specifically because I am an expert in relationship and sex therapy, meaning that there are intimacy issues, and whether that's emotional intimacy or physical intimacy. There are lots of people and individuals who will come to see me because they believe that they have very specific sexual issues. 9 times out of 10, there is an emotional component to it. There is a relational component to it. But there are just straight up dysfunctions or disorders that are going on that I can help them with. Now, I am not a hands-on therapist. I'm not a physical therapist. So there will be no touching. I don't watch people have sex. I don't critique them or anything like that. Especially in my state, that is not allowed. There is such a thing as sexual surrogacy therapy. That's not what we do. That's very different. And that looks a lot more like sex workers. And now, that said, they usually do have some sort of a certification or license in some sort of mental health field in order to help them specifically with those issues. So it's different from sex worker in that way. But no, what it isn't is watching anybody naked or doing anything like that. Like it's talk therapy. That's what we do. And fortunately, you can get a whole lot done without having to actually experience the sexual realm with your clients. And honestly, you're not supposed to. And that's actually a really big no-no. You should not be doing that. So if you know of anybody who's doing that, that probably needs to be a call to the state board.
Oh, yeah. No, we are. I think everyone in Tennessee is a mandatory reporter. So yes, we don't know anyone. Yeah, that would be, I feel like you would definitely have to let somebody know.
Yeah. So it's definitely not that.
Okay. Yeah. And I just think it's important that, because again, I think there's being a man who's like looked into like, hey, I need to check on my mental health. And then I think it's easy to feel lost. And so again, if there was anybody listening, like, hey, it's important to know, like, this is what this is. And definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a big part of having and you guys talk about it on the show as well, but like a big part of having a successful relationship, marriage is having that successful intimacy component where it's you can communicate the best in the world or, be great partners when it comes to parenting. But it seems like if you don't have that mesh, then it feels like you may be lacking something.
Ultimately it probably won't end well. Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people wonder what the expectations are that I have as a sex therapist on the couples married at first sight. And do I expect them to really explore that avenue within the 8 weeks? The truth is no. Like I don't expect them to do that. I do respect that they do. I wouldn't tell them don't do it if you really want to and both of you are feeling like adults and you can consent to it and all that. And that it's something that they want to do. But it's certainly statistically speaking, it's like 50-50 if it works out well or it doesn't, whether or not you had sex or any sort of sexuality during the process or not. I think it makes sense that some of them want to explore their compatibility in that way, just like they want to explore all other ways that they're compatible.
Right.
So I don't fault them for doing that, but I do want them to be very conscious about it, especially if they have issues in the past, whether or not we know about them, then we want to make sure that they're treading carefully.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. I've never got the sense that you're like, well, you're married now, hop on in there, have some fun. But it's definitely, it seems like the message is kind of go at your own pace, what feels comfortable for you. I did want to ask, so again, you've got your master's, and my wife is going back for her master's in social work this year. So I know it's like it's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge undertaking, and really something to be proud of. And
good luck to your wife. That's exciting.
Yeah. She's the superhero in our relationship. I'm the guy that's like, if I'm interested in something, I'll learn as much about it as I can possibly fit into my head. But traditional school has just never been my thing. And she's very much, I'm awesome. I kick ass at school.
Oh, nice.
So she's very excited about it. But again, that was what you had mentioned with, before your second child was born and getting it done now. Like, we've got one, and I'm 7 years older than she is. So, there have been talk about possibly having another one. And then it's like, how do you go back to school and have 2 kids? And so it's definitely something I can relate to. But I did want to ask, like, you've done all this work, right? You've set up a successful practice. It's growing. You're hiring interns. How did you link up with Kinetic Content? How did you find yourself then being on national television?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I never had any sort of like, oh, let me be on TV. I was on TV because I would have local stations ask me to comment on different topics and, different things that were going on. And I really enjoy live TV. I think it's fun. And I was one of those people, I don't really get nervous. Which I didn't realize is a big barrier to a lot of people, and they don't do it because they get too nervous. But I've always felt pretty comfortable in front of the camera. It never occurred to me to seek out any sort of television show or anything. But I want to say at this point, maybe 5 years ago, I had 2 different production companies over the course of 2 years contact me and say, hey, we're looking for somebody to help us to kind of pitch shows. Will you please do some on-camera work like this, and on like a Zoom digital platform, and we'll use the conversations we're having to try to pitch shows. Well, nothing ever came of those. And at that point, it was a lot of like getting excited, like, could this happen? And then nothing. And then getting excited, could this, and nothing. So then finally I said, you know what, maybe there's something to this. These people keep coming to me. What if I do have some sort of, I don't know, it factor? I don't know what the word would be, but I thought maybe I can do this. So I reached out to the company that I could find online that had the most reputable relationship shows, and that was Kinetic Content. And I did my research and I figured out who was in the casting department. I sent an email. I said, hey, this is who I am. Here's some videos of me on live TV. This is my curriculum vitae with everything that I've ever worked on and all my credentials. If you're ever interested and need an expert on any one of your projects, please let me know. they contacted me like the next day to set up an appointment. And I was like oh
ring,
my
ring.
gosh. I was floored because, I didn't think that would happen. And like within a few days, I was face to face with them online talking, and it wasn't for like another 2 years that, they needed a new expert, and they contacted me. I remember I was in the bed with my whole family because we were watching TV together, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're calling me, and it's kind of late here, and it's kind of late in California, but it's really late here. And they were like, hey, are you on an agreement with anybody else? No. Okay, well, stay tuned because we definitely want you. So that was kind of amazing, an amazing call to get. And it wasn't until 5 days before I was supposed to be filming that I actually came to an agreement with my contract. And then that was it. I was meeting Dr. Pepper and Pastor Cal the night before we filmed, and it's been just crazy and fun ever since.
Now, were you a fan of the show before, you had reached out to them? Had you watched any of the episodes, anything like that?
So I had seen season 1 when it came out at that point. And then once I started talking to Kinetic Content, I became very aware of all of their shows, especially Married at First Sight. So I can't say that I was like religiously following every season, but I definitely started before, once the talks were happening. So probably the 2 years prior. And so much so that I knew when they were going to be filming in Dallas that, I'm in Houston. So I called them and said, hey, y'all are going to be in my neck of the woods. I'd love to meet y'all in person. And that ultimately getting that FaceTime in with them was able to help me to get, the job. So just showing tenacity, which I don't think I lack. And then also knowing that you do have to be very patient if you're going to be in this field, and that, you have to work for it, but it's also not something that you can make happen. They have to really want you. And fortunately, they really wanted me.
Yeah. And I mean, 2 years is a pretty long limbo period. I mean, I'm sure it's, I'm sure it's helpful that you have such a successful practice, and it's not like you were just sitting around.
Oh yeah. No. Actually, it's so funny because it wasn't until just recently that I started realizing, like, wait a minute, this has been my side gig. This has been like the side project for so long. And now I feel like it's becoming more half and half.
That's awesome. And, I was asking if you've been a fan because, first of all, Pastor Cal, I'd love him on the show. And Dr. Pepper, there's something about Dr. Pepper that reminds me of my mom. And so like anytime I see her, I immediately miss my mother because my whole family lives in Michigan. I live in Tennessee with my wife. So I immediately miss my mom. And then I'm like, I bet Dr. Pepper gives a pretty good hug, because that's, I associate her so much when I see her. And then, the way that she gives advice and things like that. I wanted to ask, so, you go from, you've done these things on local TV, and now you're on Married at First Sight, and there's this huge community behind it. What was that? Because you came in on, it was season 8, right?
Season 9.
Season 9. Okay.
Yeah, right at season 9.
And season 9 was Mat and Amber, correct?
Yeah.
The first season. So, and Mat was a colorful character. So I imagine that being your first season, it seems like there's always.
There were so many colorful characters. Jamie and Elizabeth, my goodness.
Oh man,
Iris,
when she dropped the B word, and I looked at my wife, and my wife was like, "Oh, Dr. Viviana's about to go off. Like this is her last day." Like
it was so like I stepped out of my body for a couple reasons. The first is I don't curse. I never curse. It's just not something that I ever do. So when I had the response of, you didn't just call me a bitch, did you? I was like, oh my gosh, I just cursed.
On TV.
On TV. And I was like, they're never going to show it. they're never going to show that. Why would they show that? They don't, whatever. But the reason that I called her out on it was because I was new to the show and I'm younger. I mean, I'm actually only a few years older than some of these people. And I was like, they are not going to talk to me like that. Cause in a split second, I was like, she would never have said that in front of Dr. Pepper. She would never have said that in front of Pastor Cal. Like, what? I'm like, I'm setting the stage here. No, I'm not your friend. I am your expert guide. Right. And so I felt proud in the moment, but when they aired it, I was dead. I was so embarrassed, and everyone who knows me was like, "Oh my gosh, you said a bad word," and it was on TV, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" It was like a total facepalm moment. And meanwhile, Beth and I are texting each other like, "Oh, did you know that we're fighting? Did you know that this is," because we moved through it very quickly. But the respect was there. It had to be there, and it has to continue to be there.
Well, yeah, and I looked at my wife and I was like, $10 says Dr. Viviana takes her earrings off. Like she's, but it was one of those things. It really reminded me of exactly like you said, like you're the new person on the show. That age gap is not very big. And it almost reminded me of like, the new kid in school who has to like be assertive. So the bullies know, like, not saying that she's a bully or anything like that, but like to be like, you're going to treat me with respect, I didn't ever take off my earrings until much later this season. I cannot wait. So what was it like for you that first year? Because you go from, you're running your own practice, you've done these spots, and now you're on, again, a television show that there is a following that is just so invested, and you kind of become in a way like a household name. Because again, these seasons come out so fast. It's like, I told my wife, it's almost like you're missing the ability to process a little bit, because by the end of the season, it's like the next one will be out, in 3 weeks. So.
Yeah. That for us, we process things, of course, as they happen. And this season, even more so, like we've had to process so much as like every day, every night. And so when it finally does air, there's this sense of opening old wounds. It feels like, oh my gosh, this was months ago, but we're having to relive it again, and to relive it with all of America and beyond. I can't complain again, because our participants are the ones who really went through it, right? We went through it from our own lens, but these aren't our marriages. So we can only do so much and provide so much support. They've actually gone through all the decision-making they have to make on a daily basis, and juggling. They have to do so much juggling. So for us, it's very difficult, but we're so lucky and proud to be a part of something that brings love to so many people. Greg and Deanna announced today the birth of their child, and when they of course were so sweet to let us know ahead of everyone, and I was just like, this is my first masked baby. This is why we do this. Cal and I, we were out with my husband and some family, and I was like, Cal, this is my first masked baby. He's like, I've had 8. I'm like, okay, you win. But this is why we do it, because the potential is there for something that is really changing people's lives forever. And we always want it to be positive, but it isn't always the case. And of course, we try to learn and be better, but I don't know that we'll ever be perfect. I just don't think we ever will be, because we're just not perfect beings, but we try. We sure do try.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think, and again, we'll get to the newer season, or the current season here in a little bit, but like, it's when it ends up working out, I don't know. It seems like it's worth it to, because again, you're going to have people, I think, that maybe present themselves a different way initially. And then you don't, and I believe some of the experts have said that, like, you don't know how someone's going to be when they get on camera and things kind of change.
Or even when they're married, we see them as single people. And who someone is when they're single and who someone is when they're married and who somebody 10 years down the road into a marriage, these are all different people. So the best that we can do is with the information that we get and that we gather and make decisions off of that. I personally am not going to volunteer to date or follow somebody for 6 to 12 months before we match them. Sorry,
right.
That's not what I signed up for. But within the time period that we are looking very deeply into who these people are and what we think they could bring to a marriage, we try to do our best for sure.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask too, because you had mentioned this and I wanted to touch on it, but like, let's take season 10, for example. That was Zach and Mindy, right?
Yeah.
So you look at something like season 10 where, talking about people that, you match them up and then you don't know how they're going to act. And I think Zach and Mindy is a good example of that. So, you go through, you're filming this whole process, you're emotionally dealing with these things as it comes through. And then you had mentioned when you're watching the show after, as it airs, it's like opening those old wounds. So is it hard for you as an expert to get to a place where like you've processed everything and then it's like, well, get the shovel because we're just gonna dig it right back. Like what is that cycle like? Because again, with the way that you guys put out the seasons,
funny. That's such a great analogy because that is truly what it is. That's what it's like. You're kind of like, all right, well, we as a team have worked through this. We've worked through it with our participants. And now let's see what all of America thinks. And the people who are loudest are the naysayers and the haters. So, fortunately, we know that. And I'm so glad that, being a mental health professional, I know how to protect my mental health. It doesn't faze me. It doesn't get to me. But why I do get very impassioned about it and I get very upset with is that the participants are not. They are dealing with it as if, this could be the person next door. And we do try to give them, I especially really try to give them lots of good advice or what I hope is good advice and helpful advice for them to how to deal with all of that, because that's not something that anyone can ever truly understand until you've experienced it, is when you get backlash for something or when you get prejudged or those first impressions that people have, especially of our participants, that's brutal. And again, if you know how to handle it or you've been through it or you've been there, done that or whatever, it really isn't that big of a deal. But for our participants, it's brand new and it's happening and it's real. And you're talking about as you know, you said you're a part of some of these groups. I've gotten screenshots from some of these things. It is brutal.
Yes.
It's actually, it's disgusting at times.
Yes.
And so I do get fired up about that, not because I don't think people should be talking about the show. That's amazing and it's so much fun. But there just seems to be no line. There's no boundary. And that worries me for our participants and their mental health. And sometimes people will say, oh, well, they deserve it because this is the way that they acted. Or if they didn't do that, then we wouldn't be saying this. There's still a line of decency that I think mine might be a little bit closer in than some of these people. And so it does bother me when I see that. And even if I do think somebody was a complete jerk or, just mishandled the entire thing, I'm just one of those people who never thinks it's okay to really, truly try to cut someone down and even, really hurt them or harm them. I don't think two wrongs make a right.
Yeah. And for a second there, I thought you were going to use a curse word. I got really excited when you said jerk, but I was like, Mom, it was something else. But I think you're right. It's for people who have watched the show, you're going through all of these applicants of people who want to be on the show. And then you kind of, you start narrowing them down, but it's not like you said, you're not following these people for 6, 12.
We're not mind
12.
readers either, right?
So it's based on, it seems like it's based on, this is what this person is presenting that they are wanting. And based on what they're telling us, we think we could find them a good match.
For instance, if somebody's out there looking for someone to fulfill a position at a job, and your higher up says, hey, you need to hire somebody by April 1st. Do you wish they had told you, hey, you should start looking a year ago? Yeah, sure. But if not, you're going to make a decision based off of all the information that you get and your ability to interview them and see what the potential is. Now, does that mean that come April 1st, you're going to have the best person at that job that you could have possibly gotten and you could, sign your life away on them? Probably not. Will they need guidance right after? Yeah, some more than others. Some you might have to write up a few times. I mean, you just never know.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. I think it's very interesting that, again, you're exactly like when somebody comes in and interviews, they talk about their job experience, they talk about why they should get the job, but it's what they're telling you that you consider when you hire them. Not, you can't put them in the role and say, well, let's have you do the job for a week and then we'll see if we want to keep you.
Right. Because then it wouldn't be married at first sight.
Right. So it's, I don't know. It's really interesting. And I think, I don't, let me ask you this. Do you think it's fair? Like, for example, for Zach and Mindy, because, over the last few seasons, that was a big one where it was just like, it seemed the common consensus for people that were not fans of Zach were that this was something that he wanted to use as an opportunity to build his brand. Do you think that's do you think a generalization like that is something fair, or do you think it was legitimately like he signed up for it? And because I imagine there's people who sign up to be on the show that get on the show and then they're like you said, I was not prepared, or like, is this really, and you're processing, is this what I really want, all in your head?
They're like playing catch up with their emotions. Sure. I think with Zach, what's so funny is I still think to this day that he is not a bad person. I think that a lot of people are saying that he did all of this just for that, just for fame or whatever, to build his brand. Obviously, that was something that we all considered. We're like, we could do that. We could cut him out because of that and that alone. But, it's a double-edged sword. This show is so popular now. I don't know that we're ever going to get somebody who hasn't considered what this is going to do for themselves. And the truth is they should consider it, because if they don't consider what this could do for them in the public eye, they are going to really struggle mentally. But with Zach, and it took me watching the show as the season aired to figure out what really happened. And for me, I feel like Zach was a completely typical average guy, except when it came to talking about his marriage. I mean, he's one of those people where you could talk to him about anything and it's like, oh, great conversation, da, 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 da. But when it came to talking about his marriage to Mindy, there was so, I don't really know what the blocks were there still, but it was like almost like his brain couldn't compute what was happening. So that's why you get a lot of the runaround language and the kind of feeling of like, what am I listening to? That you ask him about his job, you ask him about his family, you ask him about what the weather's about, you ask him about day's events, whatever it is, it's not the same person talking. So there was some sort of a hurdle there that he wasn't able to overcome with her. Now, would they still be saying that if he did end up loving her and did end up finding her to be his one? It's all easy to say that in hindsight. And I think we like to try to create reasons and explanations for people's behavior. That's what I do on a daily basis. I get it, but I'm also getting a lot more information than the snippets that we're seeing throughout the season. So the question you asked is it fair for people to make judgments about the participants based off of what they see? As long as they realize that it's based off of what they see, sure. Right. But I think, again, the reason I get so upset with people when they're just so vile towards anyone, it doesn't matter who it is, but especially towards these people, is because this isn't scripted. And these people aren't actors. So when you say this person is XYZ, you're saying that this person is actually XYZ and that their families are messed up or whatever it is. Like, there's weight to it. Whereas with other shows, it's like, it's totally scripted. They know what they're buying into. They know that they're going to play this role, and they can easily have it just kind of fall off their back. Whereas
when you're written to play the villain, you go home because you understand that that's what your job is that, on Homeland, I'm the bad guy,
right,
for this series or for this season.
And even those actors say it's really tough. I'm walking down the street and people throw stuff at me or yell stuff at me. I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine if they were actually criticizing you as a person. Whew, that'd be tough.
Yeah, and I think it almost comes down to like a sense of tribalism, where it's like our brains naturally want to have somebody to root for, and then we naturally want to create like a heel or a villain character. And I think when you watch the show, and maybe almost because it is real people and not characters, you're quick to assign.
Sure. Or maybe you've experienced something like that, or you've seen somebody go through that. With Paige and Chris, that's a perfect example of what's going on right now. I know that there are hundreds, millions of people out there who can identify with either I was the person that everybody was saying, you need to leave this relationship, or I've been the person telling my friend, my close friend, family, whoever, leave this person. But I don't know, and I'm a therapist, and I've had to tell people that. I don't know of anybody who has ever left anybody else without actually being ready and wanting to.
Yeah, you've got to, like, it's the same thing. Like, I smoke cigarettes. My wife used to smoke cigarettes. She quit. She was ready to quit. I apparently have not gotten there yet, but
there you go. So it doesn't matter what somebody tells you. It doesn't matter how often they bug you about it. Until you are ready, until you have seen it through and understand what it's going to look like with or without them, and you're ready to go, you're not going to do it. So we do get a lot of people who I just answered an email yesterday. Why didn't you tell Paige that she had to leave? And why didn't you kick them off the show? And why didn't you stop production? Well, you're giving me a lot of power that I don't have, first of all. And second of all, excuse me, as a therapist, I know that I can only say, like, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what I see is happening. This is what I think is going on. I think X, Y, Z, and you would be well within your rights to decide that this isn't for you. But we cannot make someone do that. And if we were to pull anybody off of the show, if we felt like their behavior was not what we would want a healthy relationship to look like, I can bet you that half of the couples that are still together and doing well would not have gone, they wouldn't have made the cut. This isn't about
Beth
that.
And Jamie come to mind. Like, when you watch their season and seeing them like the first half of the season, you're like, there's no way. Like, these people.
Not only that, but John, you and I are married. If there were cameras rolling, in one day or a week, whatever, and they wanted to point out some of the things that we do to our spouses that aren't healthy, they could find them.
Oh yeah,
for sure they could find them.
Yeah,
whether it's a look or whether it's, oh, you didn't answer this question, or you're on your phone looking. I mean, we would all look terrible at times, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, like you're spending time with you're on separate couches, and like my wife has a couch that we make the conscious effort to say, like, hey, we're gonna sit together like at these times, but she's got her couch where she's like, all right, get up, I want to stretch out.
Same.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But if you don't have any context to the relationship, it just looks like two people sitting across the room from each other, you know? So I don't know. I think that's I'm sorry to interrupt. No, please.
I do love the rhetoric. I do love the discussions, the conversations. I do love it when people talk about, like, well, how would you respond to this? And how would you feel? Or what do you think is happening? All of that, I feel, is one of the reasons that I was so gung-ho about doing this project, is because it's it actually helps you in your own relationships, and it can help you to figure out what you don't want and what you do want. I think when people start to kind of get to that place where I'm like, gosh, you really don't know what you're talking about, is when they start making up things about what we do, about who we are, about who they are, that I'm like, oh gosh, well, you had me until then, but now you don't make any sense. So, okay, well, all right, bye. But I do love all the conversations. I think it's great.
Yeah. And I think you're right too, because in these online settings, and I'm sure that you see it in your, like, I know that you've put out some things on Instagram that have just been like, you people.
Oh my gosh. And it's taken the complete opposite way. And then so again, sorry to interrupt, but you totally reminded me of something. Yeah. I had a live recently, it's not recent anymore, but recently where, I was, it was like 8:00 in the morning, I'm getting ready, and every once in a while people ask me questions about the show, but I'm mainly talking about my practice or what I do. And I said, guys, first of all, y'all need to chill out. Like, y'all need to just watch the show. Let's see how it works out. You would have thought that I all of a sudden had like, I don't even know what happened, but all of a sudden there are like articles I'm getting pinged on and tagged in about, oh, she's freaking out on freaking out on viewers. And I was like, what? When did I do that? and so now I've learned, okay, don't answer questions on live, because people will just make up whatever they want and interpret it however they want. I've never had that experience before. I've never had people take literally 2 words and turn it into, I'm now pro-abuse. I don't even, it's like unfathomable, but it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, now I've learned my lesson. I won't be answering questions about the show on lives anymore. Like, I don't need to do that again, because it does live on, and it gets twisted and turned into different ways. I never had that experience before.
Yeah. It's, I had Mindy on the show, and within like a week, Soap Dirt, which I guess is a website, they picked up did a whole like column on the interview that I did with her.
Right. And it's just fake news. It's like, it's not like it's an E or People Magazine or, so it's like, but they can say whatever they want.
Right.
They can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter if it's true or not.
Yeah. And like, you see people that like, I know Dr. Pepper put something out that was, it's one of the earlier seasons, but it was Joe and somebody else, but she was like, look, they had a rocky start and look where they are now. And then you see like screenshots are forever. And it's like, I know. Yeah, she just said some people start off rough and end up making it through. Like, just
that's exactly right. Cause I talked to her about it, because we talked like immediately, because she's never on social media. So she was, it was posted and then she was off, and I'm like, oh, by the way. So anyway, and she was like, okay, I've learned my lesson, because it doesn't matter what I'm trying to say. People will take it in so many nasty ways now. And unfortunately, it does tend to veer towards the negative. I don't think I've ever had anybody say, bravo for saying this, and bravo, Dr. Pepper. No, it's always negative. And that is part of what I'm learning, is part of what happens when a show gets really big. Something that we didn't have to deal with last season or previous seasons. Now it's like, okay, now I know why people don't get online and talk about things, because you never know how somebody's going to spin it. And fortunately, it's not like we have to be online, and we have other things going on, but it was more fun. It was more fun when we could just say whatever and not have it be turned into I'm the devil. But I have fun in so many other ways. It's okay.
Yeah. And it's crazy, because I think it's the same social media effect where it becomes an echo chamber, where like, first of all, you have the anonymity to be like, well, this is what I think of Dr. Viviana or Dr. Cal or, Pastor Cal or Dr. Pepper. And then it just becomes this echo chamber of people that are like, yeah, me too. You know what I mean? And it's, stuff that I think that people would never, if they were in a situation like we are now, where granted it's virtual, but like we're face to face, would never say anything like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's
I would hope not, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. You get the wrong person. And I also think there's a lot of validity to the fact that people kind of have the visceral, because in these groups, it's a lot of, I dated someone just like Chris, or, with Matt on season 9, like, Matt's a dog and I know what he's doing when he's at, it's like, I dated a guy just like this, or I dated a girl. So it's like, again, I think it's just that your brain is just, I want to create somebody that I know that I don't like, and also if you got rid of those people, like you said, if it seems like it's being rocky, like you go from 5 couples down to like 1, if that.
Well, maybe. It's not just that, but then it becomes censorship. Like, I'm sorry, but I want to see what's going on and how they work through these things. And why would they get to choose what this couple gets to go through? You know what I'm saying? Like, it almost becomes well, first of all, we know we can't please everybody.
Right.
But on top of that, it becomes a thing of like, well, wait a minute. This is a docuseries, right? So they're going to document whatever happens, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Now, does that mean that they're not going to step in cases of like physical safety or danger? Of course they will. And they've had to do that in the past. Like, they are very conscious of that. But I recently got a DM that asked me, like, how could y'all leave them in the same room alone together? I don't understand. Like, she's saying, first of all, it's just one of those things where, what do they expect us to do? If they want to be in the same room talking to each other, we can't. Just like nobody could stop us from talking to each other. It just like, right. How does it, what are we going to bring the police in? What are they going to say? They want to talk to each other and they shouldn't, because it's not a good idea. Okay. And why would you, I mean, some of these things it's not really well thought out. I can see why people would not want for certain things to happen. Tonight's episode, that's a big one, but
yes, it is.
But what's funny is I think a lot of people think this was a production call. This is not a production call. These 3 people wanted to get together to talk. Is production going to say, sorry, no, we've never had an outsider come and talk, so you can't do that? No, they're going to say, right. Fine, let's do it. Just like if they had just said, well, we changed our mind, we don't want to. It's not like production saying, you have to.
Right.
Like, these are adults. These are real situations. I don't know what else to say about it. Yeah.
And it's just, it's, again, like you said, it's a docuseries. There are plenty of people that aren't on camera that have been in similar situations. That's like, I meet this person's great. And then I find out this person from my past is suddenly back with, I mean, it's
that's a warning I have to give my clients who are deciding to go through divorce. I tell them, I said, look, y'all, I know that it might be difficult for the next few months in lots of different ways, but you need to make sure that you do not get intimately involved with each other again. And if you do, that you are very conscious about the choices you're making, so that if one of you ends up pregnant, it doesn't change the decision and the path that you were trying to go on, which is that you're very clearly stating today you want a divorce. That happens. That is a real life thing. That is not a TV thing.
Oh, yeah.
People make choices like this. This is not unheard of situations. It's just really sad. And we're not happy about it.
Right.
That's the difference. And it's happening in public, but this sort of thing happens all the time, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. And I know here in Tennessee, like if you are filing for divorce and then, someone ends up pregnant, let's say, the woman is with somebody else and ends up pregnant, you can't even finalize your divorce until that baby is born. And then there's a DNA test because you may owe, child support.
Wow.
Or so, yeah. It's again, I think because it's on TV, it becomes so easy to kind of demonize things that, like, if you knew this person personally, would you have more sympathy for them if it's someone that you knew in your real life,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I do think a lot of people think, well, if you don't like them and they don't like them, viewers, why can't you just stop them from completing their contract? Well, again, this is a docuseries. That's a slippery slope. so all of a sudden the experts don't like someone and we get to just say, sorry, I don't care if your marriage is going well. We don't like you. You're out. Like, that's not the way it works.
Yeah. And, I did want to ask you this because this season does seem a little bit different compared to some of the other seasons where Eric, for example, has been married before. And I don't
he's
believe,
the first.
Yeah, I don't believe there's been, I didn't think
there's been engagements. There's been people who've lived together, but nobody who's had kids and nobody who's been married.
Yeah.
Before Eric. Yeah.
I actually wanted to play, we have a question from the internet, so we got a theme song for it.
Questions from the internet.
I'm so excited about that. It's the only second time I've got to use it.
I love it.
So I do have two questions. The first one that I wanted to ask, this is from a Reddit user named Blue Lights for Black Girls. And she actually left us an audio message. So I'm going to go ahead and play that.
Hi, Dr. Viviana. I was just wondering why the fact that Chris, having been engaged so close to the beginning of the casting for the Atlanta season, why was that not a factor that automatically eliminated him from contention? Because it would seem to me that having been engaged so close to the process, that it would imply a certain level or lack thereof of emotional availability that should have made him a non-starter to be matched and married to somebody. Thank you.
And thank you for the question. And kind of talking about, with this season being a little bit different as far as, Eric's situation, and then with Chris being engaged, I thought it would be a good thing to kind of tackle just to, see how you felt about it.
Yeah. So Chris being engaged back in February and March that's not unique. We've had lots of people who were engaged within the last year, within the last 5 months. There are other people on this season who were engaged as soon or as recently as 5 months ago. So that's not unique. I think that for me as an expert, I definitely take that into consideration, both the negative and the positives. The positives are that when we've had people who have shown that they've been willing to get engaged before, that is a sign that they are marriage minded. Now, does that always mean that it's going to end up being amazing? No, but for me, it's definitely not a no-go. If anything, it shows they wanted to get married. In Chris's situation, he made it very clear to us that was kind of like a Hail Mary pass in a 7-month relationship. He told us that getting engaged, it was only for 2 months. They didn't work out, and that was the end, and it was over. And then he decided to apply and do all that later. We get lots of people who are out of relationships who have said, you know what, I was on this track. The other person wasn't, so I stopped it, and then y'all showed up at our doorstep or on DM or on my TV or whatever, and I decided to apply. I don't think I will ever think, even still, that having somebody who was recently engaged and in that sort of a commitment, that in and of itself will ever cut somebody out altogether. I think that I feel almost similarly to that as I do people who haven't been in a relationship for 10 years, 8 years, 7 years. There's more to explore there. Okay, what does this mean? Why haven't you been in a relationship this long? What happened within the past 4 months, 5 months? What are you thinking now? It's more to explore, but fortunately, we don't get one chance at these people to ask them questions. We get to ask a lot of questions. And they probably are like, oh my gosh, why are y'all asking me this again? I just spoke to this person. It's because we really want to make sure that when you say you're done and over with that person, that it's actually the case. Again, I'm not going to get into my FBI gear and go track them down. That's not going to happen. But
that would be a good show, though, if there was like Dr. Viviana's SWAT team where you're just staked out.
The low cap, and I'm just like, lurking around the corner
somewhere.
Yes. Oh, you know what? That would be fun. That'd be a fun outfit.
I'm going to pitch it. Watch out, Lifetime.
So yeah, I think that for a lot of people, they're like, oh my gosh, that is insanity. Why would you ever want somebody who was so recently engaged? And it takes more conversations than just that. And the truth is, we've had other people, and they go on to do amazing things in this. So we're not the type of people who will say, we will never have somebody who does this, because that never works. In this situation, it takes two people to make it work. An individual is just one piece of the puzzle, and they in and of themselves do not have they're not the key to making the relationship work. The two people are. So yeah, I can see why people would wonder that, but it's certainly not as something to avoid as they think it is. It's just because it's Chris. Right. I think people just don't want Chris. Well, I get it. Like, I get it. He's not being the husband that we ever expected or wanted. So, but I can't like do revisionist history and say, yeah, that was not, we should have seen that. No, I mean, right. He didn't present with this sort of person before he got married. So I can't go back and I mean, I have, believe me, I'm watching this. I'm like, did I miss something? But we've all discussed this many times with production, like with casting, and everyone says the same thing, which is this was just a huge, I don't even know what the word is at this point. It was a huge learning experience, and you can bet that we are learning about how to make things better and try to avoid. Will we ever be 100%? No.
Well, and I think that's something that people don't necessarily take into consideration either, is that, like, you know, yes, you guys are experts in what you do, but that doesn't mean that you're without fault, or that there isn't like some hindsight
that no one
element.
Could ever possibly lie to us.
Yeah. Or like you're infallible because, you know, you're on this show, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, let me ask you that. Has that been hard for you? Because you talk about people are looking at the cast members and again, they're portraying them as villains, but they're real people with real personalities. You're the same way. Like you're a real person with a family. And so is that ever hard for you? I mean, I know you've got your ways to, with your background, like
to cope with it. Yeah.
Health, but like, is that ever, are you ever like looking and just being like, you guys don't know me. Like, you don't know me. You know, is that ever a challenge for you?
Every once in a while it bubbles up. And I turn to my husband and I'm like, read this. And he's like, I don't want to read it because, you know, it gets me upset when I read that people are saying lies about you. I'm like, I know, but this is part of my process. He's like, fine. So I let him read something and he's like, wow. Like if people only knew how much you care and how much you try and how much you beat yourself up when things don't go well and how much all three of you are just on the phone nonstop when somebody's going through something, or, you know, just trying to figure out what we're going to do better. But they can't know. Nobody, fortunately, there are no cameras in my house. And so, and there won't be, I hope. But that's the sort of thing where I just have to kind of vent it and then have to remember they don't know. And it's hard because I can't watch the show objectively. I've tried. I think it's kind of fun to do that or to try to, but I can't. So I think for them, I just have to remember they really don't know me. They don't know the process. I will say, I was talking to one of my cousins and she's like, oh yeah, all these people are saying how fake this show is and that it's all about ratings. But guess what? If somebody was to call them and ask them if they wanted to be an expert on the show, would they say, no, it's fake, it's all for ratings? They would say, yes, absolutely. And I'm like, yes, actually, that's probably true, because they know in their heart of hearts, or maybe, I mean, I hope they do, that it's not fake and it's not just for ratings. It's a really interesting project that has ended up with so many love stories and so much growth as an individual for those who end up being single again.
Yeah, and it seems like it's all worth doing for the people that, you know, like you can have 3 out of 10, you know, divorces, but then, you know, for the couples that stay together, or, you know, 3 out of 10 marriages, but and 7 out of 10 divorces. But for those those 3 couples, like that's got to be worth it as far as being like, okay, investing this time and helping these people not only find you know, like you look at someone like Miles and Karen from last season.
Oh yeah, they would have been a couple that people would have been like, get them off the show, get them off the show. And that's what people were saying.
Yeah.
And look at them. They're amazing.
You know, and then you see someone like Woody and Amani, who, you know,
pretty smooth sailing.
They had that connection right away, and you know, they had bumps and stuff like that, but they were good at. Because I will tell you, when I watched last season, my initial response of Woody was like, he's not ready. Like, you know, because hearing his friends and stuff. And then as soon as I thought him get matched, I was like, I was wrong. Like he's, you know, he's in this, and they got him someone that works, you know, and so it's,
you'll never know. You can't truly predict it 100%.
Yeah. And I got to be honest about this. So with Chris, I'm not a Chris fan. But I will say it's not, I think my issue is not that, like, you know, he's done anything that I think he should be kicked off the show for. But for me, when I was watching it, I think it was just.
You wouldn't want to be married to him.
I wouldn't want to be his friend.
Right?
Because when he came on and said, you know, I'm looking for a submissive woman and I want to have 7 kids because that's my legacy. In my head, I was like, this is never a guy that I will want to hang out with, because we look at the world completely different. I want a partner. I want my child to like grow up. Like I tell my wife all the time, like everyone's like, oh, you had a baby? Congratulations. I'm like, congratulate me when she's 18, 21, and she's not a piece of garbage. She's like a good human being.
Right.
So,
John, you are not alone in your assessment of that. But as one of the experts, we always have to remind each other, literally have to remind each other, we don't have to marry them.
Right.
If we find someone else who we think would do awesome with them, they're the ones that have to marry them. So when someone comes to me and says, like you just did, oh my gosh, he said he wants a submissive freak. Well, first of all, do you actually think he said freak to us? No, he didn't say it in that way. He didn't use his colorful language, but that doesn't matter, because I'm fine with him wanting a freak in the bedroom, but we have to find him a freak in the bedroom. Right. Did we do that? Yes, we did. Am I cool with being in a relationship with somebody who wants somebody submissive? They're not going to be cool with me. That's not my bag. Did we find someone who wants a traditional relationship? Yes, we did. So that's what people aren't understanding, is that just because the language that is used may be kind of distasteful or not really palatable for the majority of people, we found him someone who is practically saying the same thing, that they want to be that person. They are that person. And that's what we care about. Think about people like Amelia and Bennett.
I love
cutest couple. But, you know, and Pastor Cal was very open and honest about it. He was like, it was very difficult for me to match someone who didn't have a steady income, who didn't have a reliable income. Was that an ideal match for everyone? No. Did we feel like it was perfect for Amelia? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So that's, I mean, we have to step back sometimes. When it comes to attraction, you can bet that just within the 3 of us, we all think different things are attractive. It's not about what we think.
Right.
It's what we think could happen. And even then, it's still a guess. No one knows who's going to be attracted to anyone. We can hope, we can say, well, based off of the pictures that we've seen, based off of what they describe that they want. But if those things worked, they wouldn't be with us. So that's part of the experimental, quote unquote, aspect of all of this, is that there are still things that we will never be able to completely 100% predict.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next statement, is that, like, even though Chris is not somebody that I would personally be like, oh yeah, I want to like hang out with you or do things with you. You guys very much, you know, yes, he said he wanted a submissive freak. And I immediately thought of that Ludacris song. I want a lady in the street, but a freak in the bed. But shout out to Usher and Ludacris if they're listening. But but then, he said, I want to, a woman of God. And then that made sense to me, is that, that's that traditional Christian, the man is the head of the household. And then you have someone like Paige, who is like, that's what I want. I want a man of God, and I'm okay with being in that role.
I just think in the past, we've never really seen it become something that was such a glue, such a magnet, that, in the past, when we've obviously taken into consideration spirituality and religious beliefs when we're matching, it's always been a positive and a strength in the relationship. It hasn't been like a crutch, like it has been so far with Paige and Chris, I believe. And that's where I think it's like, that's where it goes bad, right? Because in the past, we've said, oh yeah, this is so wonderful. They're so aligned spiritually. And then this, it's almost like, yes, they're aligned spiritually, but it doesn't look how we want it to. Right. We couldn't have predicted that. I don't know.
Yeah, I looked at my wife and I said, even God's shaking his head right now. He's like, you don't have to take this. But, I think in the overall scheme of things, like, you guys do a really good job. Like, Haley and Jacob are another one right now that are kind of catching heat online. But like, when you look at them, you have someone like Jacob who seems extremely introverted. You know what I mean? He has the things that he likes, but he's, very settled in those. And then you have someone like Haley who has a lot of friends. And so it's like, yeah, put them together, because maybe, he comes out of his shell a little bit, and, she can appreciate some of his quirks and stuff. So it's,
and his stability. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, and
him being a really good guy in relationships.
Oh, he's my favorite guy.
Whereas she has not had those experiences. So it's like, there's a whole lot that they both bring to the table that is good. Do we know whether or not all those things are going to make them want to fall in love and be together? We don't know that yet, but it's not so much that it's an opposites attract. It's more like, how many couples do you know where one person is this way and one person isn't, and they find a way to really help each other and balance each other out? I don't know that we will ever again match people who aren't opposites, or match people who, there's always going to be that maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, but we can't know. And we're not going to have any, at least for me personally, I will not have these hard and fast. Besides the kids thing, I do feel strongly that this is not the process for to bring a child into. But
this is your dad for 8 weeks, so
yeah, right? Like, that's
like
so messed up. That's so messed up. But I do think that there shouldn't be a lot of hard and fast rules about what is a yes or what is a no, because the whole beauty of this is that sometimes amazing things happen, and people work through so many amazing things through this process.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I think you're right. Like, if I was married to someone exactly like me, we'd both be 500 pounds, because all we eat is fast food. But I'm married to someone like my wife, who's like, hey, I like cooking healthy stuff, and like, maybe we should go for a walk. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that, I need someone like her in my life, where, also, like, these people are on the show because, like, hey, your choices in relationships in the past obviously haven't worked. So maybe we need to look at somebody who's a little bit different than, what you've been looking at previously. And I think sometimes it's hard because people get so emotionally invested in the show. It's hard for people to remember that, like,
yeah, or they're trying to figure out what could have been, or what would this person do well with? What would this person like? For instance, with Zach, he made it very clear to all of us, do not set me up with someone that I could find at a gym, because I've dated them all and it doesn't do it for me. Do not set me up with somebody who looks like a fitness model. And I guess in my mind, a fitness model looks one way, in Pepper's mind, and Pastor Cat, like everybody's, but we knew that the substance was there, and we knew that the beauty was there, both inside and out. And again, like, we still don't know what somebody is absolutely going to be attracted to and what they're not. I mean, everybody who says that they know, I think I'm like, I don't know how you can predict that.
Well, and you hear it 100 times throughout the show. It's like you can grow into attraction. I know my sister has been with the same guy for something like 11 years. And when they met each other, they hated each other because he's very much the kind of guy that like he picks on you picking on you is his like love language.
He's flirty.
Yes. And she was like, no, I don't, and for a couple of years, they were like, I don't like my sister was like, I don't like him. And they've got a second kid on the way. You know what I mean? So it's like, you never know. I think people have this idea of attraction of it's like, I saw her and we were immediately in love. And, and it's like, sometimes that it doesn't work like that for everyone,
Yeah. And I will say for anybody who's listening, who's ever considering, applying to be married at first sight, if you know yourself well enough to know that the way that somebody looks has to look a very particular way and you can't describe it, or you know that that's it, but it's not something that you've ever gotten before, or maybe you have but it didn't work out, don't apply for this. This is not for you. That is way too much at stake. You're putting way too much emphasis on what we have to find, that needle in a haystack. I wouldn't do this. If that's fine, right? We all have our preferences, but don't come to us because you're literally you're rolling the dice when it comes to the attraction, physical attraction thing, if that's all you're about.
Yeah. And I think you make a really good point because I read an interview with you, where someone, had asked like, who shouldn't apply for the show? And you basically listed two things. If you're super picky about about the way a person looks physically, show's not for you. And if you are someone with a transient lifestyle, this show is not for you. And to me, when I read that, it seems almost like you can pinpoint where that has been an issue and then see like Henry and Christina, for example, like still don't know where Christina ever actually lived. You know what I mean?
Oh,
but
she had a house, don't worry.
but you think about that. And then with I think about Luke and I believe
Kate.
Was it Katie? Yeah, Luke and Kate, or like Chris and Paige, where it's like, I'm not attracted to you. Where it's like, okay, well, if those are the things that are important, or like your top priorities, obviously you're not going to be able to put yourself in a position where you're really open to go through the experiment and put the work in the process,
Right. Yeah. I just think if you have a very, very specific taste or look that you can't possibly grow an attraction, you tried it just didn't work, no offense, just don't apply.
Well, I did want to ask you this because I know we've been going for a little while here, and I appreciate you spending time and hanging out on the show. And I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in, again, like the people that we tend to like villainize on the show, or like the real, like, this is where the drama and the tea is and everything. But like, this is your 4th season on the show. When you look back and you think about some of the couples that have been your favorite or your success stories, what are the ones that stick out to you as far as like, this is the reason that I took this job as the expert. This is the reason that I'm on this show. Who sticks out to you as like the fondest memories?
Oh my goodness. So many. There's just a lot of individuals who are just so wonderful and kind. I guess the relationships that I think that make me think, gosh, this could work out for so many people. I mean, especially because they're on my mind today. Greg and Deanna, I feel like there was something so steadfast and committed to the process for both of them. They made our jobs easy when it came to matching them, because it was one of those things, a lot like with Amelia and Bennett, where we're like, okay, these two are done. I mean, like, we all meet them and we're like, oh my gosh, there's something about their vibe and their wavelength that it just seems like it's on. And I love how respectful they are in their communication. They get their points across. They get their needs met because they are able to keep things very, I'm sure that they've had their arguments, right? But they're able to talk about things in ways that are just so like textbook almost.
Well, just in a healthy way. Like
in a healthy way. And then you have something as beautiful of a love story like Jamie and Elizabeth in the same season where, oh my gosh, every day it's a phone call and all three of us, did you hear? Okay, what are you going to say when you go visit them? Okay, who's going to do this? What's going to, and everything changes every day. So it's like, okay, well now let's change our plan of attack with these people because they're going through this. And look at them. They are textbook couple who believes in therapy. They believe in getting counseling, which is true for everyone. Everyone is allowed to get counseling, and the show pays for counseling during the show. Not with us. We have our separate role. They have access to their own counseling during the show and after, both individually and as couples. So they took advantage of that, and they've talked about it. So I know it's okay to say that. There are other people who have absolutely taken advantage. They stayed married, and one person might take advantage of individual counseling because why not? It's getting paid for it. Like, right. Just do it. And even if it's not, even if it wasn't paid for, I still think it's worth it for them to do it, but it is paid for. So there's that. I just think that being able to learn and grow as a married person truly doesn't really happen until after everybody's gone and after we're not holding their hand. And some people might flail during that time, and other people say, no, like, we really want this to work. Let's get help. And they take advantage. And I love that. I feel like that's so mature and smart.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, I don't know. I think it's important to remember that like a marriage the work is never done. And that's the one thing, my wife and I, we've been married for 4 years, and we've been together I moved here in 2012. So it's been coming up on 8 years, but like, it's never like, you're like, okay, we're married and we're in a good spot. So
let's coast.
Right.
No,
it's like and especially well, let me say, I guess in a healthy marriage, you're always working. You know what I mean? Because there's always
you're always not trying to stay on top of things because there's always threats into your relationships. And I think you should always be on your toes.
Yeah, and I think people's needs change over time too. Like, you get into different life situations and so I don't know. I've always told my wife, like, I want a partner. I want somebody that like, yes, I love you. We're physically compatible, but like, if I need to push a pickup truck down the street because my engine went out, like, are you going to be steering while I push, or we both push? Like, you got to be there to help me. So, and I think sometimes I think Paige is a really good example of that, because she's as much as people want to dog on what's been going on with aspects of their relationship, she has said, like, look, I think she just sat down with somebody recently and gave an interview where she was like, I'm committed to the process. So that's why I'm sitting down with.
And no one can talk her out of it. Believe
me. So I know no spoilers, but it sounds like we're going to have to keep watching. I just wanted to say thank you. I know we've been going for a while here, and I really, really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time. Will you stick around for me for a minute after we wrap up?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sam.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's episode 48. We are almost to 50. A huge thank you to Dr. Viviana Coles, Married at First Sight on Lifetime. Wednesday nights, you guys it's on all the on-demand platforms. Watch it. Go back, watch the earlier seasons. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for checking out the episode, and we will see you guys next week.